let's talk about the single most expensive unintended consequence of the recent conflict in the Gulf. And no, it's not what you think. It's got nothing to do with oil tankers. It's all about servers, data centers, AI, and a massive, massive bet that just landed smack in the middle of a war zone. Okay, let's get into it. Just look at that number for a second. $500 billion. That is the scale of the investment that is now directly, physically at risk. It's an absolutely staggering figure, and it represents this monumental push into the future of technology.
So, what is this number really? Well, it's the price tag for an ambition to turn the Gulf into the computing hub for the entire Eastern Hemisphere. It's a bet on the future of AI that, honestly, until very recently, looked like an absolute sure thing.
So, how did we even get here? To really understand the risk, you first have to understand the logic behind this massive wager. And you know what? On paper, it was a brilliant strategy. It was built on some incredibly solid foundations.
And it seemed like everyone wanted in on this. You had Saudi Arabia's public investment fund throwing in over $100 billion. The UAE's sovereign funds were pouring in tens of billions more. And then, of course, the big tech titans followed suit. Microsoft signed a $1.5 billion deal, Google fired up a cloud region in Dammam, and Amazon and Oracle were aggressively building out their own massive data centers, what we call hyperscale facilities.
The whole idea was just so elegant and incredibly compelling. I mean, think about it. The Gulf had the world's cheapest energy, a perfect geographic location sitting right between Asia and Europe, and basically limitless cash to build it all out. The strategy was simple. Build the giant data centers, and the world's data will have to come to you.
And for a while, it was working perfectly. The whole thing was humming along right up until the moment that the single most important assumption, regional stability, was just completely shattered.
And suddenly, what looked like the state-of-the-art digital fortress was revealed to be something totally different. It was a high-value target, sitting right out in the open, with a fundamental physical flaw that this conflict has just brutally exposed.
This right here is where the entire strategy just flips on its head. Every single one of those advantages, well, they suddenly became critical vulnerabilities. That cheap energy, it depends on infrastructure that is now a military target. That strategic location, it's now a geographic choke point. And all that sovereign wealth? Well, now it's just massive capital exposure to extreme physical risk.
Okay, so here's the crucial point. You can't just pick up a data center and move it. They're the opposite of agile. They're these huge, fixed buildings that need an insane amount of constant power. And they're often built right next to the very power plants and industrial zones that become prime military targets. In fact, a CSIS report confirmed that cloud facilities in the UAE and Bahrain were already hit in the crossfire. You just can't hide them.
And get this, an enemy doesn't even need to score a direct hit on the data center itself. You just take out the power grid that feeds it, or you hit the desalination plant that provides its cooling water, or you cut the submarine fiber optic cable that connects it to the rest of the world, and boom, you get the exact same result. A very, very expensive building full of completely useless servers.
But this whole mess isn't just about physical buildings and cables. It very quickly escalates into this deeply complex geopolitical and financial trap. And it's especially a trap for the American tech companies that bet so big on the region.
Analysts at CSIS came up with this perfect term for what's happening: asymmetric interdependence. So, what does that mean? It means that companies like Microsoft and Google and Amazon now have billions of dollars of their own money at risk in the very same place their own government is involved in military operations. They signed up for a business deal, not a war zone.
And this, right here, is why this matters to everybody. If that Google Cloud facility in Dammam goes offline because the local power grid gets hit, that's not just a local problem. That is a Silicon Valley problem. It's a problem for global customers running their AI models. It's a problem for governments hosting sensitive data. It's a problem for basically any company that relies on that cloud to function. You know, this whole crisis strikes right at the very heart of the cloud computing promise. That core idea, your data is safe with us. That is the fundamental trust that the entire multi-trillion-dollar industry is built on. And that trust just evaporates the second a customer loses their data. Not because of some software bug, but because the building it was stored in got caught in a missile strike. So what happens now? I mean, with this new reality, the financial logic that drove that entire $500 billion investment is being completely recalculated. And we could be looking at the start of a great migration of tech infrastructure.
The financial fallout is immediate, and it's going to be long-lasting. Think about it.
Insurance premiums for operating in what is now a conflict zone? Yeah, they're not going back down anytime soon. Customer confidence? It's already eroding. Companies are quietly looking for ways to move their data somewhere else. And connectivity, something everyone took for granted, has been proven to be incredibly fragile.
The bottom line is really this simple. That whole $500 billion bet was made on one single core assumption, that the region would be stable. The war didn't just challenge that assumption. It absolutely shattered it into a million pieces. And so this forces a massive question for the entire tech industry. Where does the next wave of all this investment go? The search is officially on for regions that don't just offer good economics, but genuine long-term stability. And all of a sudden, places like India, Southeast Asia, and parts of Eastern Europe are starting to look a whole lot more attractive.
And this leads us to a final and frankly fascinating political twist. Suddenly, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon are major stakeholders in Gulf security, not because of some grand geopolitical strategy, but to protect their own balance sheets. They become this quiet but incredibly powerful lobby for de-escalation because, hey, when their massive investments are at risk, Washington tends to listen.
And so we are left with what might be the defining question for the next decade of AI infrastructure. The cloud has to physically live somewhere on Earth. So where do you build it when you can no longer be sure the ground underneath it is stable?
In the end, I think this quote just says it all. The Gulf made a perfectly logical bet that compute would be the new oil. But they forgot one crucial detail. In their part of the world, the new oil is sitting in the exact same blast radius as the old oil. And right now, both are under fire.